Welcome to the History of Assyria channel. The subject of the language spoken by Jesus Christ and his apostles is a subject of great importance to Christians, and much research and debate has been published about it. The churches that branched off from the Syrian Apostolic Church of Antioch, such as the Maronites, Syriacs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Malabar Church in India, boast that they still use the Aramaic language spoken by Jesus. The Hellenistic Greek churches boast that the Gospels were written in Greek, and that Christian theology was almost entirely in Greek, to the extent that the bishops in Rome read the Bible in Greek, until the late 4th century, until Latin translations were adopted. In the East, the Aramaic Peshitta translation of the Bible was not completed until the beginning of the 5th century. The Jews boast that Christ spoke Hebrew as his mother tongue, as he was of Jewish origin. Judea was an area where Hebrew culture intersected with Aramaic and Greek. The Jews wrote some of their books in Aramaic, such as the books of Daniel and Ezra, and the use of the Aramaic language spread in Samaria and the Galilee region, where Assyrian kings such as Sargon II settled large numbers of Babylonian Aramaeans. The Jews also translated their holy books from Hebrew into Greek in the 3rd century BC in what is known as the Septuagint translation, which was worked by 70 Jewish rabbis who lived in the city of Alexandria in Egypt at the request of King Ptolemy II. Before the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BC, the Jews were in harmony with the Syrian Seleucid rulers in Antioch and adopted their Greek language, and Greek dress was common among them, and the Greek gymnasium was popular with them. However, the Seleucid king Antiochus IV's decision to consider himself a god and his imposition of pagan worship in the lands of Judea led to the Maccabean Jewish revolt, which succeeded in gaining independence from the Seleucids. The Galilee region was one of the Jewish areas most influenced by Hellenistic Greek culture, especially the large Greek colonies of Neapolis, Nablus, Scythopolis, Baisan, Caesarea, and Tyre. Aramaic was also widespread among Jews and Arameans, which is why this region was known in the Bible as Galilee Gentiles. There is biblical evidence that Jesus Christ mastered Galilean Aramaic, the Aramaic dialect that prevailed in Galilee and was probably the language spoken among the Jews at the time, while Hebrew was the language of religious literature. The Greek Gospels retain some of the Aramaic words and phrases used by Jesus. In the Gospel of Mark 5, Jesus says to Jairus' daughter who died, "Talitha cum," meaning, "Arise, you who are sleeping." There is evidence that Jesus also mastered the Hebrew language, which was still spoken among educated Jews and their rabbis, as it was a sacred language in which the books of the Old Testament were recorded. In Luke 4, it is mentioned that when Jesus was in Nazareth, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath and read the book of Isaiah the prophet. There is biblical evidence of Jesus and his apostles' mastery of the Greek language. When Jesus and his family took refuge in Egypt to escape Herod's persecution, Greek was the dominant official language in Egypt at the time. When Jesus returned from Egypt, he lived in Galilee, where he chose his 12 apostles, and the cities of Galilee witnessed the preaching and miracles of Christ. Preaching and work was not possible in this region without mastering the Greek language. In the Acts of the Apostles, a distinction is made between the followers of Christ from the Greeks and the Hebrews, who formed a single community, confirming that all, or at least most of them, mastered the Greek language. Jesus spoke directly with the Roman soldiers and Pilate, confirming his mastery of Greek, the language of Roman authority in the eastern provinces of the empire. When Jesus traveled to the city of Tyre, which was then a Hellenistic Greek colony, he addressed the Canaanite woman directly, and this confirms Jesus' use of the Greek or Aramaic language with her. Some of Jesus' apostles bore Greek names such as Philippus and Andrew. Matthew, who worked as a tax collector for the Roman authorities, would need to master the Greek language to practice his work, as well as the apostles who worked in fishing, such as Peter, James, Andrew, and John, who would need to master Greek to sell fish in the markets. In the Gospel of John 12, there are Greeks who approached the apostle Philippus, asking him to see Jesus, and it is certain that the language of conversation between them was Greek. In John 7, the Jews believed that Jesus would go to the Greeks and teach the Greeks, further evidence of Jesus' mastery of the Greek language and his to preach among the Greeks in their own language. There is archaeological evidence confirming the widespread use of the Greek language in Judaism in the 1st century AD, such as papyrus manuscripts discovered in the Judean desert, which indicate the Jews' use of the Greek language in letters, contracts, and religious texts. Many Greek inscriptions have also been discovered in the Galilee region and even in Jerusalem. Much of the literature of the Jews was in Greek at the time, such as the letters of Aristeas and the additions to the Book of Daniel. That is why the Gospels and Acts of the Apostles were written in Greek, which was the dominant world language at that period, and Christ and his apostles, as we mentioned, mastered them, such as the Apostle Matthew, the tax collector, and also the Apostle Paul, who was a Roman citizen, preached Christianity among the Greek nations in Syria and Asia Minor, and the Apostles Mark and Luke, who was a Greek physician, accompanied him, and the Apostle John was not just a fisherman, but a merchant selling fish and fishing nets, and his Greek gospel shows a great Aramaic influence of phrases and vocabulary. As for the Aramaic language, it was only a spoken language at that time and was not transformed into a written language until the middle of the 2nd century in the city of Edessa in eastern Syria, after the invention of the Aramaic Estrangela alphabet. Thank you for watching, and do not forget to subscribe to the History of Assyria channel to follow all new